Alright, I already finished a couple videos this week. I've got several more partially scripted or sitting on the back burner, some which I've even recorded clips for. They don't get many views anyway, so I was just gonna fuck off, relax, and play some video games.
There's nothing a man can do that I can't do better, whether it's serving drinks or slaying trolls.
Until I came across this article, and it triggered me enough that I decided I had to say something about it. So rather than my usual scripted videos, where I try to give at least a minimally entertaining visual, I'm going to be trying to make this a quick, minimalistic rant. The article is called The Best Video Games of 2018, and it begins. In recent years, members of the alt-right, in blog posts and in YouTube videos, courted young men who shared an interest in video games. That may be the beginning of the non sequiturs, but it is not the end of them. The wooers include Steve Bannon, when he was the executive chairman of Breitbart News, and the former Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos, who churned out posts with titles such as Feminist Bullies Tearing the Video Game Industry Apart. And yes, I believe they go this whole article without mentioning Gamergate, which of course is very ethical journalism. This scheme has proved effective. Last month, a YouTube user uploaded a clip from the recent blockbuster video game Red Dead Redemption. Can you see where this is going? A cowboy playpen set in the late 19th century American Southwest. In it, the player guides his character toward a computer-controlled suffragette who is campaigning for her right to vote and punches her unconscious. Which is directly traceable back to Steve Bannon. The video, titled Beating Up Annoying Feminists, has been viewed more than 1.7 million times, with a chorus of support in the comments below. This kind of trolling can easily escalate. Earlier this month, NPR broadcast a story in which a father recounted his dismay at finding a neo-Nazi pamphlet that his 15-year-old son had printed out after being encouraged by fellow gamers. And we're going to skim this article because it is actually pretty interesting, especially being by NPR. However, they don't tell you what this article was about. And the NPR article is titled, Right-Wing Hate Groups Are Recruiting Video Gamers. Also a claim which is not substantiated in the article. There's not a single hate group mentioned. If anything, 1.7 million people posting on a Red Dead Redemption post aren't a hate group, they're a culture. John had no idea what his 15-year-old son had gotten into until one night last year when John walked into his home office. John saw a large pile of papers face down next to his printer. He turned them over and found a copy of a notorious neo-Nazi propaganda book. Did he read Siege? I'll tell you, I read the Turner Diaries on audiobook, and by the end it was like a comedy. It was a completely diluted fantasy. And if my channel had grown faster, I had planned to actually make a video review of the book. But as things are right now, that's really not on the table. It's the white culture's in trouble, and we're under attack by the Jews, blacks, and every other minority. It was scary. It was absolutely frightening to even see that in my house. I was shaking, like, what in the world is this? And why is it in my house? Those must have been some fucking scary words. Imagine that's the reaction I'd have if I found my kid looking at lolly trap porn. John confronted his son angrily. I was through the roof. And then I went back to my room. I was crying like a little fucking bitch. Like a soy boy pussy. I felt like a failure. That a child I had raised would be remotely interested in that sort of stuff. Almost every teen plays video games. 97% of boys, according to the Pew Research Center, and 83% of girls. And increasingly, these games are played online with strangers. It's exactly this way, John says, that his son started hanging out with avowed white supremacists. And that claim is the only evidence of the entire central claim of this article. These people became his son's friends, talked to him about his problems he was having at school, and suggested some of his African American classmates as scapegoats. But they was good boys, and they did nothing wrong. They also keyed into his interest in history, especially military history, and in Nordic mythology. Above all, they offered him membership into a hierarchy, whites against others. He started to feel like he was in on something. He was now in a crowd with these guys. It provided some structure and identity that he was searching for at the time. John learned that his son had been drawn into conversation with at least one group that the Southern Poverty Law Center calls a Nazi terrorist organization. He searched online for help and found a man named Christian Piccolini. The name Christian Piccolini instantly rung a bell with me. I've heard of this man stalking and harassing people on Twitter, back before my account got nuked simply for my channel logo. Christian Piccolini works for MSNBC, among other places, and has given a TEDx speech.
In fact, Christian Piccolini's organization
Was the beneficiary of a $400,000 grant given to them by Barack Obama only days before he left office. He gets a massive amount of media coverage. And I can't take the time to go deep into the research right now, but I've heard some dark stuff. This is also what Joan Donovan has seen. She is the media manipulation research lead at Data and Society, another name that should trigger a bell. After all, they're the ones who put out the Alternative Influence Study, the recent hit piece. Given that this is the source of the information, I have no doubt that they would designate someone like Sargon of Akkad, or even Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan, who also appear on the chart, as being white supremacist recruitment tools. Probably using video games as their medium. Because why not? It makes about as much sense as the rest of the claims in these two articles. She calls gaming culture one of the spaces of recruitment that must be addressed. Donovan says that recruitment, even the planning of harassment campaigns, happens not only during in-game chat but during live streaming of gameplay on platforms like Twitch and YouTube. For example, there's a feature on YouTube called Super Chat, where fans can offer cash tips while gamers are playing. People will donate $14.88, which is a reference to a white nationalist slogan, as well as 88, which is most commonly found in prison tattoos for Heil Hitler. Somehow, they get the 14 words, but can't get the 88 precepts by the same author. Game-related Reddit threads and chat sites like Discord also host similar conversations. Last year, a non-profit media collective called Unicorn Riot, yet another familiar name I believe from the Ferguson rallies, published chat logs from Discord in which known white supremacists planned aspects of the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. Video games are a $100 billion industry. Man, those non sequiturs. Those are epic. So video games are a $100 billion industry. So are cars. Cars kill a lot more people. Cars are used as getaways and crimes. They're used for terrorist attacks as weapons. NPR reached out to several game and chat companies for comment. Riot Games, who I've made a few videos about recently, noted in a statement that it relies on volunteers to moderate game-related chats, and Discord, the chat room site, forwarded a statement from the Southern Poverty Law Center, praising it for recently banning several far-right extremist communities. Greg Boyd, who represents video game communities for the law firm Frankfurt Kernit, says toxic behavior, including hate speech, to say nothing of recruitment, is a key industry concern and a frequent topic of conversation. If they could find it all, they would get rid of it ASAP. But it's a daunting technical challenge. The three biggest video game platforms, Microsoft, PlayStation, and Steam, host 48 million, 70 million, and 130 million active monthly players, respectively. Boyd said that's the populations of Spain, France, and Russia. And then imagine that you're monitoring all of their text chat, all of their voice chat in literally every language, dialect, and subdialect spoken in the world. Wow, that's a goal to aspire to, isn't it? In the absence of sufficient resources for moderation, Most game platforms rely on players to monitor and report each other. Piccolini compares the companies to landlords with disruptive tenants disrupting or damaging the building or threatening the other tenants. They would take action. And once again, back to the New Yorker. The cultural problems around video games, of course, and here not just in their young players, but in their creators. There remains a woeful lack of diversity among those who design video games and in the industry at large, among those who decide what kinds of games are made in the first place. But the tectonic plates still shift, slowly, and at the edges, work of intelligence and interest is produced. While 2018 was hardly a vintage year for video games, there were releases that nevertheless excited, stimulated, and challenged their audience to think for themselves. Here are 9. And despite all the complaining and all the women beating, the white supremacist recruitment tool Red Dead Redemption 2 is third on their list. They, however, note that its launch was dogged by stories of Rockstar's exploitative working practices. But that's okay. Their employees are a disproportionate majority of straight white men anyway. So did that sound like an article about video games to you, or what?